Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's Museums and Heritage Autumn Series webinar. We are joined by Jen Ridding, Head of Public Engagement, and Flora Kay, Learning and Engagement Manager at the Barber Institute of Fine Arts. The discussion we were talking about today is From Rooms to Zooms, a journey into digital engagement. I will hand over to Flora to begin. Thanks so much.
So we're going to start the session now. It's recording. Could I just make sure everyone's on mute if you can, just while me and Jen are speaking, and then obviously at the end, if there are questions, please do unmute yourselves. So here I've got a very interesting slide. You might be familiar or kind of recognize some of the images on it. And this is a kind of digital skills scale that I put together. So from March, everyone has been on a huge journey, both personally and professionally. Interactions and communicating have been taken into the digital world, whether we've experienced this before or not, and whether we like it or not. And as we're giving you a case study on how a non-digital team has created a digital learning program, we're interested in just the experience of you, the audience, today. So I've created this digital scale. So I'd like you to take a moment just to look at this and just, I suppose, feel where you are in this scale. If you want to share that in the chat, please go ahead. But where is yourself on this scale in terms of digital skills? Or where do you feel comfortable in placing yourself on this scale? And please do share this if you want to. So we've got the kind of down here, the Futurama, you know, are you feeling a bit multitasking overload at the moment? Is it all getting too much, too many devices? Get by with a little help from your friends, you know, are you finding Zoom easier day by day? Or are you a tech wizard? I'd be interested to know if anyone actually does place themselves in the bottom right corner. And now just don't think of yourselves, think of your team. So where would you place your team on this scale? And then think of your organization. Where would you place your organization on this scale?
We've got some thoughts coming in on the chat, which is great. Thank you, everybody. A couple of multitasking overloads so far. Overloaded in getting there. That's an interesting point. So confident in the tech, just not sure if it can achieve what I want it to achieve, which is interesting.
Just Muppet. Nice. I like it. I'm going to go back so we can see the Muppet.
Working on it, but I think it will be okay. That's just generally my mantra. It'll all be okay. It'll be fine. Overloaded by choice and formats.
Jen, sorry to interrupt. There was just a really good comment a little bit further up where someone said, probably Elmo and friends, but immediately assumed by an older colleague to be a tech wizard who are then thoroughly disappointed. And I think that's probably quite a good point as well.
Yeah, thank you.
So I just wanted to point out really that wherever people are placing themselves or their team on this scale, I think Jen would agree that our team has felt at every point of this scale. And it hasn't just happened in a journey of we started at this end in March and now we're here, not at all. I think day by day, we can kind of sit down at our laptop and we could actually be anywhere on this scale, depending on our headspace, what work we've got on, what other factors are involved, and just the kind of the temperature in the air that day. So it's been really important for me and the team to acknowledge that and to acknowledge where we're feeling on the scale, especially as we're connecting with people remotely.
Thanks, Flora. So yeah, as Flora said, we're not a digital team. We'll talk a little bit in a moment about the team and what it looks like, but please don't feel that we're presenting this as digital experts. So yeah, we've been all along that scale and we're still all over it too. So I'm going to say a little bit about where we are from in terms of our organisation, just to set the context. So we're from the Barber Institute of Fine Arts, and this is our physical building. And it's so interesting to think about physical buildings because we're not there at the moment. Flora and I are at home and we were closed for lockdown from end of March, and we didn't open again to the public until the 23rd of September, and we weren't allowed to be on site. So the concept of a physical building feels very different and an alien concept at times. But anyway, nonetheless, this is the Barber Institute. We are a grade 1 listed building, and we house an art gallery and a concert hall. And we're located on the University of Birmingham campus. So here you go, we've got a little map. So the University of Birmingham is in a suburb south of the Birmingham city centre. It's a very leafy suburb. It's a Russell Group university, and we're located on the heart of the historic campus just there. So we exist as part of a small town within a big city. So the university has 30,000 students and 7,000 members of staff. So we exist in a big city that is Birmingham, in the region that is the West Midlands, but we also exist in the equivalent of a small town on the campus here. Now, pre-COVID, we were open 7 days a week to the general public and also to the university community. So we serve and work with both communities there, and it's free entry to the galleries and the building and all our exhibitions. A little bit about history. I don't know about you, but I love to find out about the history of organisations and how they came to be. So this is a brilliant picture of the Barber Institute being built in the 1930s. So we were founded by Lady Barber, hence the name, founded in 1932. And it was a purpose-built gallery and concert hall designed by Robert Atkinson, who was the architect, and it's in the Art Deco style. As I said, we were recently upgraded to grade 1 just this summer, which was a glimmer of good news with everything that was going on, which is just fantastic, and it recognises the architectural importance of the building. And we opened in 1939. Now, we're funded by the Henry Barber Trust. So that trust fund was set up by Lady Barber in 1932, using the philanthropic money that she was giving to this. And that still funds the majority of our activities. About 70 to 80% of our activities are still funded by that charitable trust. And that's significant when we talk about this case study today, because fortunately, it meant that we didn't have staff on furlough. We had our charitable grant that's given every year, and we could keep staff working. So that's significant to think about it in that way. And we recognise that not everybody's been through that journey, the same as us. So on to the next slide. Thanks, Flora.
So what you can find in the beautiful Art Deco building, as well as the concert hall, because it is a place to enjoy both art and music. For the art side, you can find 4 main galleries. So the 4 main gallery spaces are actually named after colours. So we've got the green, red, beige and blue. And then you can find a smaller gallery space called the Lady Barber Gallery, as well as 2 print bays and a coin gallery. And in there you can see a vast amount of paintings. I think there's 250 major paintings in the collection, sculpture and decorative arts, works on paper, coins, and they're housed also in the building, or used to be before we all went home, are about 25 full-time members of staff, and they're split between different teams. We're all working together. So we've got our collections team, our visitor services team, the learning engagement team, and then communications and marketing as well as our director. So this is a kind of floor plan of our gallery space. A lovely quote that's in one of the Barber literature, it actually, is that Lady Barber gave the university an empty jewel box, and then it was up to the trust to fill that jewel box with amazing things. And I think that's exactly what our first ever director, Thomas Bodkin, did. So we kind of go up the stairs, as you saw in the last slide there, there's the sign that's saying art gallery and then an arrow. And we go up the stairs and we get onto the landing here. And then here are the 4 main gallery spaces. And they go in chronological order, so you can take a journey through time when you're visiting the gallery. And the work, I think, it spans from around the 14th century up to the 20th century as you're kind of moving around this space. What's not pictured here as clearly is the fact that we've got 2 print bays here that do change regularly with different works in focus. The galleries also get rehung and kind of recollated at certain times, so the collection does kind of shift and change with that. And then the Lady Barber Gallery, where we have temporary exhibitions, is here. So this is the view that goes down our blue gallery. I always ask people what their favourite gallery space is, what their favourite coloured gallery space, and a lot of people say the blue. Yeah, there's this beautiful kind of vista down here, and we've got a nice Manet, if you can work that out, at the bottom. So that's our blue gallery there. And then I'm just going to take you through a couple of slides, I suppose, of each gallery. So the green gallery, so this is kind of where we start in the galleries. You can find artwork here, such as this Martini pictured. We've got a Becca Fumi, Botticelli, mainly paintings in this gallery, religious scapes. It really is stunning. You kind of enter and it sets the tone of the Barber in your visit there. We then go into the red gallery. You can find artwork here, such as Rubens, Flink, and then I'm going to say somewhat controversially, we actually have a painting by someone called Frank Auerbach, because he is the only living artist who has a painting on the walls in our collection at the moment. So that's actually the only painting in the collection that kind of doesn't follow this chronological system. We go into our beige gallery. There's a picture of someone in our visitor services team here taken recently, and you can find paintings, Turner, there's a Canaletto, and Simon here is staring lovingly at a Vijay Lebrun. And then into the blue gallery, where I think if, say, I was taking a school group around this gallery, you kind of have the big names that they might recognize. So Edgar Degas, a Monet, a Manet, and paintings such as that.
Thanks, Laura. So this is the structure of the learning engagement team who have worked on Barber Home that we're going to be talking about. So as well as being nosy about how places originated, I also love to be nosy about how places organise their staff and their teams. So we thought we'd share with you how we organise our learning engagement team. So you can see there we've got myself and Flora, and then we have a learning engagement coordinator and a student engagement coordinator who specifically focuses on working with the student community that's on our doorstep. Also, we thought some points around the skill set in the team and the background of the team. And yes, we all need to adapt in these times that we're living in, and we may need to become digital wizards or whatever else we need to do. But also starting with the skill set that you've got, whether it's your skill set in yourself, the skill set in your teams, your organisation, is really key. And it was really key for Barber Home. So within the learning team, we all actually have arts backgrounds. So we're all trained artists in various art forms. And so we have practical skills and a practical mindset. So in terms of delivering workshops, working with collections, working with people, and we're people. That's what we do. We also have gallery experience. So we've all worked in various different galleries, whether in Birmingham or beyond. So coming from a pedagogical standpoint, and that's our background. Interestingly, we've only been working together as a group since February. So 2 members of our team joined the Barber in the months between January and lockdown. So they had maybe 2 months on site at most, and then they've been at home. So it's been very interesting navigating that for those members of the team and working how to work as a team. And Barber Home, which you're going to hear more about shortly, it grew from an original on-site programme. So the skill set that you can see here, it led to how we approached that programme, and it was grounded in a mindset of artistic practice, partnerships, being inspired by the collection and the exhibitions, and particular team skills and team mindset. So it very much grew out of the direction of travel that we were working on pre-COVID. We didn't go off in a left field direction. It was just that we were utilising new tools and a new digital space to deliver that programme. So we thought we'd say a little bit about what we were like pre-COVID. And I don't know about yourselves, but, you know, can we draw a line in the sand? What was life like pre-COVID and what life has been living with COVID? So pre-COVID, our L&E programme facilitated between 8,000 and 9,000 on-site engagements every year. And that was across a range of programmes that worked with specific audience groups. And not surprisingly, you know, we thought about them in terms of families, schools, students, adults. We had an arts and health programme, and everything was inspired by and linked to the collection, our exhibition programme, or our heritage. And that still is the case in the digital programme. We ran a mixed ecology of free, subsidised and fully charged events as well. So for adults, we ran weekly gallery talks, tours, lectures, study days, practical art workshops and music events, combining our art and music heritage, and also ran volunteering opportunities as well. For families, we ran a very popular family programme that drew from very diverse audiences, both the university community and our wider city and regional community. We ran Creative Sunday workshops on site every Sunday, and family days and school holiday programmes as well. So students are a key audience for us and a key audience to grow. When I started at the Barber, which is now 7 years ago, I was shocked that 5% of our audience was made up of students. And if you think that there's 30,000 of them on the university, they're not all there at the same time. So we really set that as a target to grow. And we were implementing various programmes over the last few years to meet that target. So Barber Lates was a programme that was launched in January 2019. And this was a targeted and strategic programme to meet that audience development aim, to diversify our audience. And when I say diversify, that was using a range of definitions of diversity. So it may be that particularly we wanted a younger audience, drawing from different geographic or socio-economic groups as well. Now, Barber Lates was a programme of evening events, working with artist partners who were responding to the collection in new experimental ways and sometimes unusual ways. It was cross art form and very kind of experimental for the Barber. And this was the brand that we came up with. On the left-hand side, you can see the flyer there. So we've got a very short film to show you, just only 48 seconds. So that was just a series of various clips from Barber Lates events. And I particularly thought I'll draw attention to the group of people who you saw leaping about in the foyer area. So that was a dance commission working with a group called Lynn Beck, who we commissioned to create a new piece inspired by representations of animals in the collection. And they performed it at that Barber Lates event. And that's significant because we then worked with them in the Barber Home programme, and Flora will say more about that. So throughout 2019, that Barber Lates programme, we worked with around 550 people on that programme. And about 80% of that audience had never attended a Barber event before. So it was very successful in attracting that new target audience. And the most recent audience finder stat showed that 18% of our audience were now students. So we did achieve that aim of raising that. The reason Barber Lates is so important is that Barber Home, that we're going to be talking about shortly, it really grew out of the rationale and philosophy of that programme. So we also delivered workshops for schools and formal education, and also we play an increasing role in University of Birmingham teaching, and that's across disciplines. So we do a lot of work with the University Medical School. So this is a group of trainee doctors who use the collection to explore death and dying and bereavement. So we've worked with over 250 students from the medical school over the last couple of years. So that's looking back, and I'm not sure how you feel, but when you look at these images or you look at videos like that of pre-COVID activity and practice, it can feel so far away. You know, our primary purpose was to gather, to bring people together. We were focused on the building, very much experiencing the collection and the building in person, on site, and that was our role and our purpose. So Flora is now going to talk about what it has been like over the last 7 or 8 months.
Thanks, Jen. So I'm actually one of the team members that Jen mentioned that had started at the Barber more recently than others. So I started my role at the Barber in December last year. So it's coming up to a year for me in my role. It's been a very interesting year. So if I'm thinking now, it would have been 3-4 months into that in March, when our very new team experienced the great challenge of working remotely from each other due to the enforced closure and the first national lockdown. So we actually had to spend time unprogramming, which is the complete opposite to what we're used to. We're used to programming events and workshops for all our different audiences. We're used to bringing people together. We were still coming together as a team. So we spent a large period of time in March, after that kind of initial shock, unprogramming everything. So our priorities, I'd say, in that mid-March period were the care and administration around our current programs that we had to cancel, and I'm sure many people felt the same. We had already programmed all of our summer events, and it was a huge blow to the team, and obviously we needed a period of time to regroup from that and communicate to our audiences, but also people we work with, freelancers we worked with on different programs, as we had to unprogram it all. We didn't yet know when we were going to be back in the building. I remember grouping everyone in a room the day before we were sent home, saying that we might be back in May, June. I think I remember walking home with just 2 box files under my arm and a Surface Pro with a mouse. And I was like, it's fine, I'm going to be back in a couple of months. And that was kind of March. Time went by after we had unprogrammed. We were beginning to rise our heads above water from the closure. And it was actually the first time we were able to ask as a team, what now? What now for us? Do we just kind of have a habitation period where we kind of look towards this June, which was a magical June at this point, which I laugh at now, or do we do something? So as you would have seen, probably experienced, there was a sudden digital rush of content, especially in our sector, but everywhere. It was very saturated. And I think it was kind of the decision for us, do we move forward with something? And we asked what was unique to the Barber, what was unique to our collection, and what was unique to our team, and what might be valuable to people at this time. And we took a kind of slow, tentative step forward in April of what that might look like. And it kind of turned into Barber Home. So you might see striking similarities between this design and the Barber Lates poster that you saw previously. And it's because it's really kind of, as Jen said, grown from the rationale from that. So the team were all able to work from home to apply our time, energy, and experience to this programme. As Jen mentioned, the Barber is funded by the Henry Barber Trust, so it meant that we were in a unique position to put some energy towards a new online programme. So We're aware of this being a huge change for everyone, and there were lots of factors to consider, not just for our audiences, but how our team was working as well. We've never been used to working remotely before. So what we kind of wanted out of this, we knew we wanted to do a digital engagement program. We knew that we needed a strong graphic design campaign that felt us, and hence the kind of visual similarities that looked like our Barber Lates program. We needed to look at budget management and systems management. How are we actually going to do this while working from home? Someone had mentioned Zoom was a good platform, so we were kind of testing that out in a team meeting one day. I wasn't sure. We needed to see what our webpage was like and our communications plan. We needed to get together a proposed program. So we actually needed to work out what we wanted to do, what we wanted to make unique, how we wanted to connect with people. We wanted to create content that was meaningful because, as I've mentioned before, it was a kind of digital saturation that everyone was experiencing. So if I'm looking back and I'm looking at the timeline now, it was actually the 1st of April we met and got this kind of branding identity put together. And then the next 2 weeks was then all the systems and the programming, linking to content that we might have already programmed, working out how we could turn that into a digital workshop and event, being in touch with artists that we were already going to work with before we kind of had to close down. How can we adapt these things? And then it was the 30th of April that we actually launched our first Barber Home. So it went from the 1st of April to the 30th. And then from there, we did weekly content. So Barber Home as the kind of rationale, which I'll put up now. So Barber Home is a way to engage audiences with a public program with no physical interaction with the gallery or each other. It will enable the barber to remain open as a place for people to engage with ideas and creativity inspired by our collection. The initial program will consist of weekly communications of downloadable documents, social media posts, and videos shared online for varied audiences. Inclusive of this, the program could be a way of sustaining our relationships with artists, freelancers, and arts professionals at a time of unpredictable economic challenges. We will commission artists or local organisations to create participatory content to do at home in response to the barber. The branding will connect with our current Barber Lates visual language to link with the existing audiences and to keep continuity. So this was the first statement that we wrote down when we came together as a team, and we kind of like, okay, what will Barber Home do? This is what we wrote down, and this statement's actually stayed with us now from April, and it's been the statement which we communicated originally to the wider Barber team. What are the LNU team up to now? And it's the statement that we used to also communicate with artist partners who we've been working with. And I always try look back to this statement now when we're kind of looking over things as well. So the program, who was it for? Which audiences were we, you know, a lot of things we had to unprogram. We had a thriving schools program, family program, adults, as Jen mentioned in the pre-COVID slide. So who was Barber Home for? So we created a kind of program around things for adults. So perhaps inspiring and thought-provoking content to celebrate the collection, things that they could enjoy. Students, so in our team, as you saw, we have a student engagement coordinator, so it was important for us to keep connected to the student community. It was all about wellness and stress relieving activities for our student audience. A lot of them were stuck on campus at this time. There was a virtual exam period, and then also there was a virtual welcome week period as we kind of got into September as well. And then family, and then you'll notice in brackets here, but families are also schools, because families were all homeschooling at the time. So it was thinking, how can we support our family audiences, but they kind of changed this identity. And you'll see here some rather kind of technical looking InDesign templates of a kind of teal color and then a pink color. And this is how we kind of very practically broke up our audiences in the ways we communicated on social media. So we used the teal for kind of adult and student events. And then we used the family, the kind of pink family to symbolize there was something that was coming out. And these Barber Home kind of templates became a really strong part of how we worked, because we were able to have them on our laptops and kind of edit them ourselves as a team. And that was a big part of kind of how we were actually able to create this content. So who have we worked with so far? It's very strange looking back to the 30th of April when we did our initial post. The first thing we did was we worked with a contemporary opera duo called Infinite Opera, who had actually a few weeks before lockdown done a really beautiful original performance in the galleries based on Gabo and a sculpture that we have within our collection. And they had filmed their performance and taken some recordings, and they had actually written a review on it in their own time afterwards. And it was because of that relationship and them being so forward and kind of giving back this really lovely feedback document was that actually became the first Barber Home. So it was because of that original relationship and the work that we did when they did their performance in early March, that then turned into the kind of, as you can see here, we've worked with a contemporary opera duo. So since then, we've worked with 10 visual artists, 3 poet and spoken word artists, 2 dance and movement companies, 1 PhD lecturer, 1 contemporary opera duo, and 1 chef. So each week from April, we had these things coming out. As mentioned, they were kind of a mixture of things for families. So you can see the kind of pink identity down here. These are kind of downloadable workshops a lot of the time, downloadable PDFs. This was a downloadable zine template that an artist that we had a relationship with called Sarah Taylor Silverwood made based on our maternal bonds display. We started going into the idea of film. So up here, there was a film of a slip casting process by a local ceramicist called Wendy Turnay. We then kind of experimented with the idea, oh, someone's spoken about the idea of a Facebook watch party. So that was kind of down here. We did a Facebook watch party. And eventually we dipped our toe into the idea of a Zoom workshop as well. And Zoom workshops were suddenly born into the Barber Home program. So I'm going to give you 4 examples now of very different kinds of responses that came from the Barber Home program that were created by our artist partners. So each one is with a different kind of artist partner that you saw on that list, whether they were a visual artist, a contemporary opera duo, an illustrator, a photographer, a dance duo. And all of these engage with our audiences in a different practical format. So as mentioned, we did a lot of downloadable PDFs. We kind of took images and content that was already so well researched and existing knowledge that we had in our team, and we turned them into downloadable PDF workshops. This was a downloadable recipe that was based on this beautiful print that we have in our prints and drawings collection. And I thought I'd show you this because I did say we worked with 1 chef. And this was the chef that we worked with. So they took the idea of elderberries were in season around that time. This was kind of midsummer at this point. I think it was the end of July. And they did a series of videos of these. That you might forage around you in summer. I miss the sun thinking about this. We did a Facebook watch party. So this was very new for us. We had never done anything like this before. We've done screenings in a physical way at the gallery, but we'd never done anything like a watch party before. So this was really exciting. It was really exciting kind of seeing all the names pop up on Facebook. I actually use Facebook myself. I think I had to borrow my mum's account to log in to do this event. Which was quite funny. We based this on a Becca Fumi painting that we have in our green gallery all around, and this kind of androgynous figure, which is kind of viewed as a lot by visitors in the gallery. We kind of looked at this androgynous figure in the painting, and then the event was all around gender and identity and a series of film listings based on that. And then we did things like we did a downloadable illustrated Zoom background. So this was at the end of August at this point, and we were still in lockdown. We weren't back in the building like we thought. And we asked a local illustrator, Meng, to do a Zoom background for us, because we were going to welcome students into our virtual space at this point. It was UAB Welcome Week. We were thinking, how can we connect with students? Usually we'd be out there on campus, and as I said, we're people. We could go out and say hi. How can we connect with them when we're doing Zoom workshops? So we created this illustrated Zoom background that we can actually use when we're doing Zoom workshops now. And if you look really carefully, and I don't know if you know the Barber, but you might actually see some similarities in the film that you watched, because the illustrator actually based this on the film that was of Barber Lates. So there's Limbeck, which is the performance duo that we work with quite regularly. There's Jess there, she's actually a friend of mine, instantly recognisable from her bun. And then it kind of goes up, and there's the entrance to the gallery, and there's a portrait of Lady Barber there. And it was also a way for us to do a bit of a tour around our foyer and kind of point out pieces of artwork in our collection. We ventured into Zoom live workshops. It took us a while to get to this point. I think that's due to many things, confidence as well as a team. We'd never done anything like that before. It was actually very nerve-wracking, and just the kind of things that were involved in that. But we eventually got enough confidence to do some live Zoom workshops, and we did our first live family one in October half term, and we a kind of spoken word artist, Sifo, did a nonsense poetry workshop based on Edward Lear and the Owl and the Pussycat, and that was a real turning point for the team to be able to do live Zoom workshops actually and get more confident on those. So I've spoken a lot there. I've given a lot of examples of Barber Home and what we did, and it all sounds very exciting, but after the break, we're going to go into, I suppose, the more practical ways in which we did that. So before the break now, before you go, we will turn our kind of cameras off in a second, and you can go make yourself a hot drink. Before you go, I just want you to kind of pause, just think about what we've been saying, how you're taking it in. Check in with yourself, how you're feeling, how are you holding your body, how are you sitting, have you kind of checked in with yourself today? And then go and make yourself a hot drink. And then what I'd ask you to do when you come back is, can you look at your immediate environment? You might have been in this environment a very long time. You might have actually been working from home in this environment since March. You might have been able to go back into an office, I'd say lucky you. Or you might have actually been in this space a long time. Look in all the corners in the room and the environment that you're in. Which are the areas that you use a lot? Which areas don't actually you go to at all? And while you take this break now, can you just walk around the perimeter of your room for me and kind of take it all in and look at the space? And that's all I ask you to do, and you can have a 10-minute break now. So, welcome back. I hope you had a break. I hope you had time to boil the kettle. It's quite nice that you can put it on mute. I don't know about everyone else, but my kind of tea making facilities is in the same room that I work in. So I have to think very strategically of when I boil a kettle and when I'm on mute. So I'm glad everyone could have a 10-minute break. Did you walk around and explore your space? Did you walk into all 4 corners of your room? Did you notice anything different? Did you welcome some of the room back to you? Was it like, I've forgotten about this space and I'm looking at it with fresh eyes? So I'm rambling on about this because it's actually something that happened in a workshop in July, and it was a real turning point for the team actually, and it was a real turning point of then how we decided to move forward with working. So it was the beginning of July. If we think back then, we were still in a lockdown then. Shielding was still in place, and actually a few of our team were shielding at the time. So kind of everyone was going through different personal journeys as well as professional journeys. And we were working remotely and doing this Barber Home program remotely. And we asked Limbeck, our good friends, the professional contemporary dance duo who were in the film and kind of they were in that illustration that you saw. And we asked them to do a live Zoom workshop. we'd worked with them before, we had a strong relationship with them, we knew their energy, we knew their working style, but they had never done a Zoom workshop before, and they were based on movement and space. And we were thinking about space and digital space, and also the space of the rooms that we were sitting in the dark all day, kind of working at screens. And they did a live Zoom workshop on the 2nd of July. It was for an hour, and they based it on a sculpture, a small sculpture that we have in our collection called the ARP, and it's a Dada sculpture. And they created a whole workshop around it based on chance. And the workshop was called Embrace the Strange. And it was done with my good colleague, Kirsty Clark, who worked with them on this, a fantastic creative programmer. And they did a workshop based on chance where we had to do a warm up and move around, and we're on Zoom, and we had a lot of risk assessing and health and safety, just in case someone hit something while they're on Zoom or kind of tripped on a rug, and no one was allowed to wear socks. And we went to different spaces in our rooms, and we got an object that we felt connected with. We did a dance movement workshop based on it. And I'm not a natural movement workshopper. I'm, more of a printmaker or a collager or a drawer. So this felt really new to me as well. And we really reflected on it as a group. It got everyone out of their comfort zone. Everyone was laughing. It caused a lot of joy. It was quite an emotionally weighted time that week in the world. And this workshop was a really welcomed event, and a lot of students came, and I'd say we probably had about 25 people come, which is around about the kind of average of Zoom workshop attendees that we have. It feels quite nice because everyone has space to share at the end as well. And it was a turning point for us, and actually because of this we decided from September onwards solely to do Zoom workshops as part of Barber Home. Because up till then we had done a mixture of, I suppose, a few videos, and we'd done downloadable PDFs as well. And we felt like we want to connect with our audience. We want to feel like this every time we do something. We want to make our audiences feel like this every time we do something. Live Zoom workshops seem like the way in which we can achieve that with the parameters that we have. And it was also important for us to think of the artist's journey and the artist practice. That was a big part of Barber Home, of, I suppose, our artist partners. They're so valuable to us in our Birmingham community and how we work with them. And Limbeck gave us some really interesting responses. They loved the brief and the sculpture, the artist, the genre. It was a brilliant starting point to create work with. But they also said how much it made them think about their practice differently, because they themselves as artist practitioners were going through the same shift as everyone else, how to continue with their practice and survive as freelancers in a COVID world. And this workshop allowed them space to be able to think of how they might adapt that to the Zoom world. And because of this, actually, they went on to do an 8-week series of workshops with some Arts Council funding in the Birmingham area, and did live Zoom workshops from that. And we spent a lot of time with them working out the kinks of Zoom before that happened. So it was a nice example of the team shifting. Artist practitioners, we're learning from them, they're learning from us, we're kind of going through this journey together, and everyone's working it out. And that was the kind of Limbeck response that we got from it.
Thanks, Flora. One of the unforeseen outcomes of this way of working was that I attended this Limbeck workshop as a participant. So I'd not been involved in the planning or the programming. I've left that to brilliant Flora and Kirsty. And I decided to go along to this as a participant. So I checked into the Zoom call at 6 p.m. from my bedroom upstairs and experienced this as a participant for an hour. And what occurred to me was, when we work on site in our buildings, I've never been able to do that. When I'm on site, I can never be fully the participant, because I'm Jen, the head of public engagement, Jen, the toilet's flooded, Jen, so-and-so needs this, Jen, this is happening, does that person need a seat, is this okay? And to actually check into a Zoom call and take part in one of our own workshops completely as a participant in my own domestic space, it gave me an insight into probably the closest I can ever get into being into our audience's shoes or our participants' shoes. And it was really interesting. And I was taken on a journey for an hour that I'd never anticipated, and ended up dancing around my bedroom with a picture frame off the wall. And my husband was downstairs going, what is Jen doing upstairs for an hour? And it was quite phenomenal. It was a great way to start a Thursday evening. So we wanted to turn our attention to reflecting on the process and sharing some of the learning that we've acquired since April. So hopefully you can take some of this learning and put it back into your own context. So we will start with the positives and what has worked. So as it says on the left-hand side, accepting this program as a learning journey, and we are still learning. We learn every day, every week. The program, as we've outlined, has morphed and it's changed based on our experiences, feedback, and also the changing environment around us. So what audiences want and need now is very different to what they want and needed back in April or May. So it's adapting. But the first point is about adapting our existing programming, which we've already said. So Flora's outlined how we became a team of unprogrammers, which was the emotional labour in that was quite traumatic. And I don't use those words lightly, but to undo bodies of work and relationships, and I'm assuming that some of you went through this same process, that is traumatic, and it's not anything that we'd ever had to do before. But to have the opportunity to take some of those relationships, those concepts, those ideas, and transform them into the digital space for Barber Home was actually very empowering. It was very positive, and it worked really well. And as I said earlier, it meant that the Barber Home programme, we weren't starting from scratch. We were actually converting, adapting, transforming ideas and philosophies and relationships to a new digital space.
So I suppose expanding from that, it was our artist partner relationships. And I think all the time through Barber Home, we've always said that our work is only as, I suppose, of good quality of the outstanding creative practitioners that we work with and partner with, and the respect that we have for them in their practice. And if we can kind of work with them in that respectful way to create this programme, then for us it's just a success. It's a siren for me. So it felt like that the quality and the value of Barber Home reflected only this brilliant group of people that we were able to work with and have worked with in the past as well. And we saw Barber Home as artist interventions and artist responses. And you'll notice that if you ever look through the programme, because each Barber Home does have one artist partner, it was that we don't decide or preempt what that response is going to be practically or thematically. So whether it was at that point a downloadable PDF or kind of a live Facebook watch party or a Zoom, that was decided with whoever practitioner we worked with and what they felt comfortable with and what they wanted to learn on. And then also the themes grew from that as well. So hours of Zoom conversations there and planning went into each one. So I think also our existing skills. So we are a non-digital team, but as said before, we are all trained kind of artist practitioners and we work very practically. So we were really lucky that 2 people on the team had InDesign and they were quite familiar with InDesign layouts. And this actually turned into one of the most important things in terms of actually how we practically put this content together. So you'll notice before how there were the 2 coloured graphics. They were InDesign graphics that were editable to put on our social media to kind of give big, bold announcements of what workshops we had come on. And we also had templates for the downloadable PDF, so we could kind of type things and put images directly into those as well. We all learned on the job how to host best practice events via Zoom. We met every Tuesday as a team and a lot more regularly than that, going through the back end of Zoom and Zoom functions and what to do. And we learned a lot as we went along.
And of course, working digitally, it allows us to break free of the 4 walls of that physical building that I showed you a slide of back at the beginning of the presentation. So it opens up our programs to effectively the whole world. And this was something we hadn't really considered as an outcome or a positive. So Barber Home has drawn a national audience and at times an international audience, which was something that we just hadn't really foreseen. But I think it's important to acknowledge, and this is a conversation that has really developed over the last 6 months, is the issue of digital poverty. So Barber Home is a digital programme. We haven't converted any Barber Home back to analogue. We have a programme that Flora runs called Recovery Art that is not part of Barber Home, and you won't see it on our website, but that is a programme that we've converted to analogue and digital. So for that programme, we post out packs of materials and follow it up with Zoom workshops. And if you want to know more about that, you can contact Flora. But we're very aware that Barber Home, it does exist in the digital realm, and the issues that that raises in terms of accessibility and inclusivity, who can access this programme and who can't. And it remains a digital programme, but we are very much aware of those issues. We are working around accessibility, which Flora is going to say a little bit more about shortly, but it shouldn't be forgotten that just because we can access Zoom, everybody else can, because that isn't the case.
Thanks, Jen. And I've put this little quote in the corner: what we lack in experience, we make up for in enthusiasm. That's something I took from an old colleague that I've been working with a while, and I took to the barber that phrase, and I'd say that's something that has kept us through the last 8 months, and is kind of what's worked with Barber Home. We've kept on going, and we've tried and we've learned and we've failed sometimes, and then we've tried again. So we're going to say here what I suppose have been some of the biggest challenges, and believe me, there have been a lot of challenges. So I suppose skill set, like with anything, it's kind of really reliant on the skill set of your team. We are lucky that we're all very practical people and we think in that way, but also we're used to being in the building, we're used to being with people, and we had to adapt on that quite quickly. So the creation of the Barber Home PDF resources in particular required design skills that the team, they had knowledge of, but they really needed to advance that and kind of learn very quickly. And if anyone's edited a kind of InDesign PDF before, they'll know how many hours that takes to do, and learning what was manageable to do for weekly resources as well, because we did start out weekly, was a big learning curve. And the team also found that their primary means of communicating the collection had obviously shifted dramatically. So we've moved from verbal and visual communication in person in the galleries to the creation of digital resources that naturally do have more emphasis on the written word. And I'd say we're not the most natural editors when it comes to kind of writing. You know, none of us had written kind of large pieces of text in a long time, and we're used to being in a physical space and thinking in that physical way in terms of addressing people, and that was a really big challenge for us to adapt to.
Yeah, we did have to remind our colleagues, I think it was about 3 months in, our colleagues in other teams, that we are not academic writers, we're not art historians in the team, and it was just fascinating that our primary means of communication had become the written word, and that is not what we did, that's not our practice. So yeah, leading on to time nicely. So as Flora said, the first phase of Barber Home, it was a weekly release every Thursday. Somebody asked in the chat whether we worked with all the audiences every week, which is a really good question. We didn't. We decided each week what we were going to put out and who we were going to work with, and that would be targeted at a specific audience. So one week we might have a family release, the next it might be for students, and so on. We found that incredibly labour intensive, as Flora has said, and one of the really unforeseen learning points from all of this is how much more labour intensive it is to run a digital programme than an on-site programme. As I said, you know, on-site programme, we were handling 8,000 to 9,000 engagements a year. On a standard day, we'd have a school group, a talk, an evening event. We could do that standing on our heads. That's what we knew how to do in the building. And curating and organising a digital programme is a lot more time consuming than we ever foresaw, and it's more time consuming than running that programme in the building. I also think in terms of delivery and engaging with people, I've realised how much we relied on that physical in-building experience. So whether it was the experience of being in that architecture, the experience of being in front of a material object, the experience of being with a group of people, giving someone a cup of tea and a biscuit, you cannot do that on Zoom. And Zoom really doesn't do any work for you. You have to do all the work to create the atmosphere, curate the experience, facilitate the engagement. Whereas I realised that, wow, that building was probably doing 40% of my work for me when I was there. And I feel like I should say thank you to it more often, because the power of having a chat over a cup of tea and a biscuit just cannot be replicated in the digital space.
So safeguarding obviously was something that we then needed to, well, we've always considered it, but we needed to heavily adapt it, especially as we started to do more live Zoom workshops, and the kind of functionality of Zoom we were getting a little bit better at, but we still weren't there for everything. So as our live events migrated to Zoom and were quickly kind of becoming more Zoom, we required to update our safeguarding policy. And prior to this, contained only a short section about online safeguarding, because I'd say Barber as a team were not used to working in any online engagement way before COVID at all. And you know, digital programming isn't something that we were used to. And like, I suppose I know of other galleries who are also kind of a little bit a step ahead of that. So we wrote a comprehensive new online safeguarding policy, which we made available on our website. Did a new online risk assessment for that, and just made sure our kind of policies and our back of house admin were suitable for what we wanted to then achieve within the Barber Home programme.
So communicating with different audiences, as I said, we focused on a different target audience each week. And an unforeseen issue around that was that our comms and marketing had to shift every week. So it was quite challenging to establish an audience for Barber Home. If a family engaged with a resource one week, they didn't know when the next family resource was going to appear. And likewise, if we engage with some students, it'd be like, well, when are you next going to do anything for us? There wasn't a pattern to that, because the programme had initially originated out of opportunities, who could do what when. We had a really quick turnaround in April to get that first release out on the 30th of April. So our comms and marketing colleagues particularly said how difficult it was to kind of jump from one target audience to the next without any pattern. We couldn't say, oh, the first Thursday of every week is a family release, the second Thursday of every week is for adults. And in hindsight, we could have given that some thought for those weekly releases.
And just a challenge, I suppose, like everyone's had challenges in, I think it was just really reviewing the working processes. So naturally, every working process had changed because we were working remotely. And like all sector colleagues, we were working remotely from home, if working at all, navigating all the challenges that brings, not just, I suppose, in working processes, but also us as people and us as a team and our energies and our well-being, and kind of from April each month, like that change in people, and then that change in working processes as well. And just working from home was a huge challenge. So a few things that we've learned, I suppose. We've learned a lot. I could just say that. We've learned a lot. We've learned as we've gone along, and our skill set have developed rapidly, and a lot of the time out of necessity. And we've always had regular evaluation meetings, and that was kind of set at the very beginning of the program, and they were set in the diary as well. So there was no not zooming into an evaluation meeting and having a reflection period. And I suppose our learning process went through on the left hand side here of how can we adapt, how can we question, how are we editing, and how are we sustaining, and the importance of all those things. It's been really important for us to constantly question why we're working in this way, what we're doing, what are our audiences finding value in working this way? Does that need adapting? How are people's energies changing? How is the digital world changing? And that's really allowed us to edit certain processes that wouldn't have been sustainable long term. So for instance, from April, we did do weekly resources of all these different things, like downloadable things and videos. We made the decision in August not to do that anymore and turn into, I suppose, more like thematic programming. So I think we actually do have one event per week till Christmas, which wasn't planned actually, because it was the idea of we wouldn't do weekly things anymore. But it all switched to live Zoom events after a while. And then we looked at kind of thinking of the program as a whole and doing that thematically, and looking at how we can be more flexible in not just every Thursday we're going to release a Barber Home, but when do people want live Zoom workshops? When are they up? Are they in the morning? Are they in the night time? How long are they? Like, are they after dinner or before dinner? This has been the biggest question of them all. And kind of just the team remaining really flexible to learning.
So one of the other requirements was to work more effectively across the various teams at the Barber. And we were just chatting before this call started that we actually work better across the teams and communicate more effectively now we're all working at home than we did when we were all in the same building for 40 hours a week. It's crazy. So we've actually given consideration to how we can work across the teams. Communication and marketing colleagues were absolutely key to the success of Barber Home for various reasons. So we really needed to focus on working methods and communication, how we were going to work with those colleagues. Early on in lockdown, I wrote our engagement and comms strategy for our closure period. So this was built within that. And underneath that sat the Barber Home plan and also a revised social media plan. So we looked at our social media, which is something that we've been meaning to do for years. And it took a pandemic for us to do that and actually critique our social media and think about what it was doing and why. And then we also audited and reorganized our website, and you can see the screen grabs here as well, which then also led to another unforeseen outcome, which was the fact that when we were planning for reopening, we needed to implement a time ticketing system to limit capacity and for test and trace. So we use the Art Fund's free art ticket system, which thank you to the Art Fund, that's really been a real treasure. But because of that, we could then handle bookings for the live Zoom events through art tickets. Whereas prior to that, people were having to email in to our learning inbox to book places on events. So that became much more efficient and time effective for the team.
It's worth mentioning as well, I suppose, as well as art tickets, we tried to use other digital resources in order to kind of have that evaluation process. So not just the data we were getting through art tickets, but Google Docs and Forms suddenly became our best friend, and we were able to use poll functions in Zoom in order to kind of collect feedback from participants, which early on in the Zoom workshop days, we were just happy that people were there. And then kind of as we got more confident, it was, okay, what do people think and how are we formally evaluating? So what have people said? We've collected feedback, as I said, from participants of the program, but it has been for us about that artist partner journey as well. And part of our evaluation has been really discussing with our artist partners how they found the experience, as well as the audience members, I suppose, on the other side of the screen. So we've been able to do that through polls and through forms, but also conversationally with the artists that we've worked with who have emailed us. mostly it's been really positive, which has been really great. So you'll see some quotes here. This was a really invaluable exercise at this time for reimagining, rethinking and re-meeting our practice. The team were fantastic at holding our hand through the whole experience, really clear, and it's such a luxury to have someone to take care of the administration tasks. So that was a popular thing, I think, when we were working with artist partners, of we had to get up to scrap on kind of using Zoom and on these online platforms in order to look after our artist partners and also to look after our audiences.
So there's some feedback on the screen here from various audiences across different Zoom events or different outputs. And as Flora mentioned, the issue of how to gather data around this online programme was something that we didn't really consider at the beginning, and it's something that we've had to learn as we've gone along. So for PDF resources, for example, we can count website visits, web page visits, PDF downloads. We can then count the number of people who attended a Zoom event, for example. But then how do we collect really good qualitative feedback? And I think we've all got very good at that on site, whether it's using digital, good old surveys, post-it notes, whatever it is, to capture that feedback in the moment. But that was quite difficult in the digital space. So as Flora said, we've experimented with various things, using polls, now using Google Forms, and now we're working more in tandem with our colleagues in comms and marketing to ensure that the data that we do collect aligns with the data that they're collecting that goes into Audience Finder. So we use the Audience Agency's Audience Finder system. And we now have a digital Audience Finder survey that we're emailing out to general gallery visitors, but also a proportion of our L&E participants. So we'll be able to feed that data into our big picture. So far, we've had 150 people take part in live Zoom workshops or events. And as I say, with the PDFs and website content, we can count the web hits, which I haven't added up here. That was too much to add up.
So what are we continuing to work on? So this idea of questioning and adapting and editing and sustaining, what are we looking at right now? So there's a picture here of me and my colleague Kirsty Clark, as is a very normalised picture these days, us on Zoom, working something out, each from home. And we're talking probably here about all the things that we'd like to continue working on. So accessibility for us is something that, like most people running a digital program, we're aware of how this digital program can be inaccessible and how it can also be accessible in different ways, and how can we start to break down at least a few barriers of that in order to support our audiences. So after event access has been quite a big one for us, especially with the idea that not everyone wants to go to a live Zoom workshop. And you know, how can we make sure, is it about recording the event? Is it appropriate to record the event? Because it might be a private space. If you then can't record the live event, could you make an adaptation and you record something else and then you send that out separately? The idea of how can you access something after it's happened is, in a digital space, is there a time limit anymore of when it's happened and when it's not happening? So we're kind of looking at a lot in that and seeing how we can support our events if it needs to be with a supportive PDF of information. So if it's like a watch party, does it have the watch list with linked videos to it? And then people can do that in their own time and they don't have to be there on the live Zoom workshop. Closed captioning and subtitling. The kind of live closed captioning is something that we want to address in our Zoom workshops, and how we might be able to support that. And then kind of subtitling after a Zoom, that being a different thing because Zoom can transcribe it for you, and actually the differences in that and how we can support live versus how we can support recorded is all things we're discovering. As kind of that choice of not doing weekly content anymore, less is more and value over volume. And this is something that we're talking about all the time and something we want to continue on. more thematic programming. How are our events complementing each other? How can we make sure they're not just weekly things that go out in silo? Can we work across events? Our audiences then going across them as well? And how can we create that structure, I suppose, that we used to have in the gallery with the Barber Lakes programme? Sensory resources. So it's important to say that other programmes have really developed from the learnings of Barber Home, and in particular 2 programmes. So Barber Schools is something we've been working on over the summer, of resources that schools can use. These aren't live yet, but we took the idea of, I suppose, using more of a PDF, and we've been making sensory resources for schools from that. How can we embed sound and video? How could we offer activities that are away from the screen? So they don't have to be there on Zoom, they can go do something else. And as Jen mentioned before as well, blended learning models. So for our recovery art programme, we've not just been doing live Zoom workshops, we've been complementing that with physical packs and resources that we've been able to send out. And then we've also been filming the workshops away from Zoom. So then if they don't want to be on Zoom, because not all of our audiences are confident being on Zoom, they don't have to be, and they can do it in their own time, in their own space. And then if they want that social element, they can come see us on Zoom. Team resilience and energies. This is something always important to work on. Keep checking in with the team and how we are, and the energy that we're putting into this program, and just our lives in general, and how we can sustain it, and kind of those aims in the future. How we're gonna do that in a sustainable way. And blended learning, as I mentioned. What's coming up? This isn't that accurate because this event actually happened last night, so that's not coming up, that's past. But we did kind of create, I say autumn/winter, and kind of all this digital world merges now. So we've done around 4 events in our Barber Home programme in the autumn/winter time. We had the Holly Hunter visual poem workshop last night. I created a visual poem. I really enjoyed creating my visual poem. That was really nice, and mainly students came to that. We are doing a Barber Home recovery workshop, which is a practical workshop, which is based on our recovery art model, in which we're sending out materials for that pre-workshop. We're having a talk with Worm Art and Ecology, and next Wednesday we're having a creative horror writing workshop, which I'm really looking forward to. Anecdotal note here, we've noticed actually creative writing workshops and drawing workshops have just practically been a really good thing, which we are able to do over Zoom. We have experimented with a lot of other things, but these have been a really accessible way in which we can kind of frame our program. So there are actually a lot of creative writing workshops within it. How can I access these talks online?
So yeah, have we got next slide? Yeah, there we go. So if you go to the website, the web link was further on in the presentation as well. So you can see we've got online Tuesday talks, which we haven't talked about today, but they're our weekly Tuesday talk podcast. And then we've got the Barber Home link. So just look for the teal box and you can book online through those. So thank you. Yeah, thank you for being here and allowing us to share. I've seen lots of questions come through in the chat, so I'm going to hand over to Sarah, and if we've got time for questions.
Yeah, I think that was absolutely fantastic, guys. Thank you so much. We have overrun a little bit, I think, have we?
Yeah, sorry.
No, it's all been really great. So if anyone does need to rush off, by all means do. Like I said, the recording will be available, but I have got some questions that I've made a note of, which we can run through now. One of the first ones that came up were all of the online events free for participants?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, shall I take that one, Flora? Yeah, the whole program has been free, which we very much realise that's a debate in itself. So as I said at the top of the presentation, we ran a program that was a mixture of free, subsidised and fully charged full cost recovery events. We are now running a program that is entirely free. So we have lost all of our commercial income and our L&E income. This was something that I must admit we did not sit down in March and April and have a conversation about how we could run an economically viable digital programme. As Flora said, we responded to the situation. We really didn't think it was going to be still here in November or December. So the question around how we can put a financial value on our programmes is a very pressing one for the sector, I think. We're very fortunate in that we have our Henry Barber grant, which both allows our staff to continue working, and we've got some core budget that we can put towards our Barber Home programme that we would have ordinarily been putting towards the on-site programme. But we're very aware that the sector as a whole is not in the same position as we are necessarily. So it is a question. I think there's been lots of interesting studies around audiences' willingness to pay for online content, and perceptions and ideas about that have changed over the last 7 or 8 months. So it's a changing thing, but I do think it's a really pressing question.
Yeah, completely. And I completely understand your situation on it. Someone was suggesting that and I know you touched on it earlier, Flora, about the potential to record the sessions and then maybe make those the payable options, however it works. A couple more questions. Did the size of the people that were joining the sessions affect your decision on what you did, or did you set your program and then however many people engage with the program at the time?
No, that's really interesting, because I think every single event had a different capacity. We don't kind of just say Barber Home has a certain capacity for Zoom, yet we did put capacities on them depending on what the artist partner was comfortable with or how we were setting up the workshop, because groups did, I think we were more thinking of that dynamic change of how many people were in the Zoom room, because a lot of them do have that. We like to encourage that social and sharing element. So we've been planning Barber Home now, as I said, more thematically. So I think this program was set as a group up till December. So this is live now, and we're kind of not changing any decisions on those. And then we'll do January, April programming before Christmas. So we are doing it in groups, and then I suppose it's just seeing how many people come. And it's been interesting as time's moved on to then see if there are any patterns, because there hasn't really been enough to see overall big data yet, I think. And we're just very happy people are coming.
Absolutely, it absolutely sounds great. Another question we got was, have you got volunteers and other teams involved with the online content and involved with the curation of it, the creation of it, anything else?
So shortly after closure, we weren't able to facilitate any volunteers, and that was a decision that we made within the team. So as well as the communications and marketing team, as I said, who we really rely on their support with Barber Home, it is just the learning and engagement team and then the artist partners that we work with managing all of that. So it's the team that was initially up. So Jen, myself, and then Becca and Kirsty, our 2 coordinators. Kirsty's actually part-time as well, and then we kind of just we balance that of what we can do and hours as well.
Okay. There's just another question come in, but it's going to take me a little second to read it. As a linguistic accessibility researcher, the accessibility options that you were talking about and the accessibility actions that you're thinking of putting in place, many of these programs may also be of interest to autistic audiences. And actually they're just saying that actually the content that you talked about would be interesting, and that it's great work and a great presentation, and they've really enjoyed it. There's been so many positive comments about how it's been really interesting. I think one of the things that was really great was how you looked specifically at the challenges you faced and how you overcame that, and acknowledged that some of your team came with skills that actually were really useful in this. And I think that sometimes there is people aren't very openly addressing things like InDesign, and how are you even getting the materials out there. And someone else has commented about how photographers are very important in all of this, because you've got no visual content without them, and all that. So it has been really, really great. And I think that comes to the end of our questions, but I can say for definite that it's really, really positive in the comments, and thank you so much for sharing, guys. It's been it's been a really great session, and I think your openness has been really enjoyed by the participants in today's webinar. So thanks so much.
Thank you. It means a lot of people being here, and we did put our email address at the end, our learning one, which is learning@barber.org.uk. We do welcome conversations, or even if you just have any advice or feedback you'd like to give, please do be in touch, and me and Jen really welcome that. But thanks, Sarah, so much for inviting us to come along, and I hope we covered all the questions, but I'm happy to stay around for 5 minutes if we didn't.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for being here, and thanks for having us.
Thanks so much. There is actually one question. Obviously, if people need to go, by all means, but there is one person just asking if you can get a little bit of clarification on the attendee numbers for your Zoom workshops.
So I'd say for Zoom, it averages probably from around 15 up to 30, and it really varies depending on what it is. Some of that is actually decisional by our team. So the more practical stuff, or throwing yourselves around a room stuff, it's nice when there's 15 people there. And then we've done a few talks as well that had kind of more 30 people there. And that didn't require so much movement.
And actually, I have another question as well. When we do go back to what will be a new normal probably, do you think there is a capacity within the L&E team to continue online engagement in this way, as well as, you know, within the 4 walls of the building, just out of interest?
I'd say that's the $1 million question.
Yeah.
So yeah, as we said, we've got no specific digital team. We weren't working like this pre-COVID. We've now got to this point. There is no way we have the capacity to run what we're running now and what we were running in building. So we are currently, as a team and also as the whole Barber team, the whole organisation, just starting those conversations around what are we going to do when we open the doors again and we can do things on site. So it's a really pressing question, because I think what our audiences expect of us now as a sector in terms of digital, I think, you know, the level of expectation has risen. And then how do we take that back down and go back to on site? Can we do both with limited resources? So I think it's a really, really pressing issue. We're also looking at it in terms of our exhibitions. So for our summer exhibition this year, it had to be converted to an online exhibition at short notice. It actually worked really well, and there were so many benefits to having an online exhibition. So now we're looking at, we won't have our next exhibition until next June. We're not having any at the moment because of COVID. But how do we build digital into our physical exhibitions? And we've got the same budget and the same resource. So we're also thinking about it from an exhibitions point of view. But I'm afraid I don't have the answers yet.
Sorry, I put you on.
Watch this space. No, but it's a really good point. Yeah.
And I think that is the golden question at the moment is, what will the new normal look like, and how will we as a sector adapt to it, and how will we perhaps half go back to a similar practice to what we were doing before, and actually half look at the opportunity that this has opened up for us. And you touched on it earlier, the fact that you're engaging with international audiences makes it too valuable to give up. But you obviously still want that engagement. You said you're people, you want that engagement within your walls with your collection. So yeah, I can understand why it's the golden question at the moment.
Yeah, it really is, absolutely. I thought it was interesting, you just mentioned within design as well, thinking about skill sets. I wrote a funding application recently, and I actually put InDesign training for the people working on that project into the funding application budget, which I would never have done before. So I think recognising the financial implications of these skills that we need is really important as well now.
Yeah, and only going to help moving forwards, and maybe doing more things on InDesign that, you know, you can share across social media and everything else, because it's all about the digital at the moment, of course. Someone's just commented now saying, if you start seeing if people will pay you, maybe be able to build in resources and people to deliver digital plus the normal engagement, exactly what we were just saying. So yeah, I think it's an interesting conundrum.
Yeah, I think sustainability. Yeah, sustainability, I think, is on everyone's minds at the moment, and it's something that we want to keep in mind when we make any decision, I suppose. And sustainability of programme and people and audiences, but sustainability of our team and kind of Does it need to get bigger? Does it work smaller? All these questions of kind of what's the value in that?
Yeah, 100%. Well, I think we could probably keep talking about this all afternoon, and we've still got a lot of people on the call, but I think we should probably call it here. I'd just like to say thank you again, Barber Institute, for coming on and sharing this with us and just being so open about your practices and how you went about it and the challenges you faced. Again, I think it's really important to address that and share that with people so that people know that you didn't just wake up one morning with a whole online program ready to go. Sleepless nights, I'm sure, in between. But thank you again. And like I said, the recording will be available on the website, exactly where you access the information to join this Zoom. The transcript in the chat will be available as well. And I'm sure Flora and Jen will be happy to share their email addresses if you have any questions or contact information. But thank you again for joining us for the Museums and Heritage Autumn Series. And we hope to see you back here for the next presentation that we put on. Thanks so much, guys. Have good evenings.
Bye.
Thank you.